Good afternoon, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. These talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. So whether you are in Bristol or far away, you can join in the conversation. Now, my name is Martin O'Leary. I am the studio's creative technologist. I'm a white man in my late 30s, long hair and a beard, wearing a red cable knit jumper today. And every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday. And this is your chance to spend some time in the space, hot desking alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And especially big welcome to those of you who are new to the studio. Who's new? Welcome. A few late news. Well, an enormous welcome to you. For the rest of you, you've heard this bit before probably, so you could, get on your phone and start sharing the link on social media, telling people that they should be watching this talk online. That would be really great. For those of you who are new, what is the Pervasive Media Studio? Well, we're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, the University of the West of England, and the University of Bristol. And what we do is we offer studio space, desk space, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make time for collaboration. Now, quick bit of housekeeping. Please do feel free to move around. Be careful if you're near the front. Make a cup of tea, grab a glass of water from the kitchen, whatever. We do have a quiet space just through this, just in there. If you need to take a break at any point, feel free. Fire exits are at either end of the studio. If you hear a fire alarm, that's real. The studio team will direct you towards those fire exits. And there is accessible toilets and baby change in the little corridor next to the kitchen. There will be a Q&A at the end of this talk. For those of you who are watching online, you can stick your questions in the YouTube chat. Lawatim is at the back on YouTube. He's going to pull those out. He's going to be your voice in the room. If you're in the room, you can stick your hand in the air like a caveman, and we'll do it the old-fashioned way. You can get news on all of our future talks by heading to watershed.co.uk/studio, at PM Studio UK on Twitter for as long as Twitter continues to exist, at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. I'm told we are at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon these days. So, take your pick from the social media platforms which continue to operate. But now I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. Natalie Reckert is a hand balancer and circus maker, and Mark Morreau is a filmmaker and digital artist. They're going to talk about their work creating narratives of streams of consciousness on stage, which blend visuals, spoken word, and visceral performance. So I'd like you to join me in giving a big hand for Mark and Natalie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our performance. I am Natalie, and I am an acrobat, and this is my favorite handstand table. This is Mark, and he especially likes to watch things through a camera, and he likes to zoom in very close. Mark and I started to work together because we thought that together with his digital magic and my physical abilities, we can make a real handstand superhero, a handstand machine that never gets tired on stage, never sweats, and never gets nervous. Mark, do you think we can recreate something like this here in this studio today?
We can build it. We have the technology.
Awesome. So I would say we start by giving her a blood pressure monitor.
Okay.
Can she have a blood pressure monitor so she doesn't ever get tired?
One blood pressure monitor coming up.
And I think, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Let's also enhance her nervous system now, I would say next.
Enhanced nervous system. It's going. I can see it. Your nervous system is enhanced.
I think she should also have sci-fi sound effects, maybe.
Ah, sci-fi sound effects. I've probably got one somewhere in here. Yeah, there we go.
They sound rather animal, but I'll take it. And now, do you think she should auto-sing to Mark
Let's
for better
auto-sing.
coverage?
Okay, ready? We're thinking. We're thinking. We're thinking. We've sung.
Next, do you think she should maybe also have a skeleton tracker
Okay,
to
let's-
show her inner movements?
For
I think
sure.
it's a good idea. A skeleton tracker. Should we test the skeleton tracker?
Yeah, let's test the skeleton tracker. Still not working.
Am I too advanced for this
You're
technology?
too upside down for this technology.
All right, okay. Let's also increase her hip rotation by 90 degrees so that she can bend completely to the side.
Okay, hip rotation coming up. Okay, 90, 120, 160, 150, 145.
Next, let's increase her shoulder opening so that she can be a real superhero
Okay.
and open her shoulders more than 90 degrees.
Okay. We're at 90, 95, 120, 145, 150, 180. Nice shot, Natalie.
What you say, am I already on a good way to become a real superhuman?
You're definitely on your way to becoming a real
Normally at this
superhuman.
part of the performance, I'm getting a really great pink costume projected onto me, so it looks like I'm like a real pink Power Ranger. So you have to imagine that. And I think with this costume and all the digital enhancement, I think she's ready.
Well, Natalie gets her breath back from that. I'll just say thank you for watching this little extract of our performance. It's our performance, Natalie Inside Out, which is a show which we premiered at the Lowry in 2018 as a result of our residency there as part of the Developed With scheme. The show is currently available for touring if you happen to be a theatre booker, but we're also at the early stages of development of our next show, and we'll be talking a bit about that. I want to explain a little bit about the technical setup of our stage and about the technology that we work with. We're going to talk about, as you can see from those of you who have the free sheet, a little bit about how we work, and there'll be room for questions for you to ask anything, almost anything, at the end. So the technology we use, our work is powered by Isadora, which is a cross-platform software which combines a video and audio processing engine of a media server with a visual programming environment. So it's, just join the dots, really. Basically, you can bring just about anything into Isadora, manipulate it, and then send it out in real time to projectors or screens, into video streams now, whatever. Isadora used to have, I'm finding a bit wood to touch now, Isadora used to have a reputation for being a bit fickle. In fact, we had to build a bit into the show in case the program crashed. But the latest version, version 3, is very stable. So we haven't had to fall back on that. That's where the touch word comes in. Try not to make this sound like an advert for Isadora. One of the reasons why we like using Isadora is it works on the paradigm of a performance. You put actors on a stage and you move from scene to scene. So it kind of has a progressive quality to it, which fits in well with the idea of creating a show. And the other thing that I really love about Isadora is that it's created by not a programmer, but by an artist who learnt programming in order to be able to do what he wanted to do. So in our show, Natalie Inside Out, we have live feeds from 6 different cameras. We output to 3 projectors, one above, one at the back, and one doing a very special thing. Today I'm running it from a laptop, but normally we use a little Intel mini PC, which is a bit more hefty than this. The skeleton tracking that you've seen is via Kinect, and one of the issues that you've seen, and one of the things that we're looking for solutions to, are skeleton trackers, motion trackers, which can cope with people being upside down. Normally the algorithm for these things assume an upright quality, which isn't necessarily the case. Certainly not for Natalie. Yeah.
So, we would like to explain to you just how we made this first scene, which is the beginning of the performance, and an important principle so in terms of writing the show that lies behind that, which is that we think that the first scene of the performance should contain everything that comes later in a seed. I took this concept from a really great book called The Choreographer's Handbook by Jonathan Burrows, which you also have on your free sheet. And he calls the first 5 minutes of the performance the contract with the audience. So I'll just read you a quick, very poignant quote from the book, which is, the first things the audience see when a performance begins form a contract. This contract teaches the audience how to read the performance, and it is key to understanding the continuity that holds and gives sense to a piece. So in other words, if there hasn't been a horse in the first scene and a horse comes in after the interval, we find that weird. But we can, of course, accept many very absurd things in the performance if the concept of absurdity is already set up. So here in this scene, which unfortunately we don't have can see there anymore, but we have on screen, first of all, it shows the actual interface that Mark uses and that he sees on his laptop. It shows the body heat monitor, the body heat monitor. It shows the infrared images, which we'll explain later, which we filmed with a heat camera. It has this interplay between the two of us, that we talk, that I do handstands and talk. So basically with that, everything is set up. And so from 2 different perspectives, we had a similar idea. And Mark also, maybe you want to explain that about the complicity show.
Yeah, sure. So we just, oh, there we are. What was I saying about computers crashing? There we go. Well. Here we go. So so in the complicity show, the encounter, I'm just going to show you the audience comes in and there are headphones on the seat, and you put the headphones on, and the stage managers check that the headphones are working, and this is how the show itself actually starts.
So if you put on your headphones, and if I were to breathe in your brain will tell you that I was really breathing in your ear, and it might even start to get hot.
So maybe get a little idea of the fact that they use this show, they use binaural audio in this show. This is the microphone that he uses for anybody who's interested. But the idea is that at the top of the show, McBurney explains all the technology that happens in the show. And so you're used to it, you know it's going to happen. So when it comes as part of the narrative, you don't go, oh, what was that? You accept it as part of the narrative. And that is, again, what we're trying to do here, that you're not marveling at the technology, but you accept that the technology is just part of the performance.
Yes, and as you have experienced, we like to speak directly to the audience, because one of the very important things of our work is to create a sense of connectedness. with you as the audience, and for you to be able to have to experience my thoughts, my body from very close up, and to transmit a sense of this visceral experience of the acrobatic body. Another very important thing that we haven't been so aware of when we started making that shows the importance of the gaze and of how you look at something and what looking and being seen implies. And we very quickly became aware that looking and being looked at never comes without an agenda and always sits in a social context. Maybe you just want to explain the...
So when we were making the show, you know, we were trying out lots of things, and we came up with this. Natalie's body is, well, it's quite covered up now, but if you were to see her in her training clothes, she has some scars on her elbow from operations, and the kind of the scars that you pick up from being an acrobat, of a lifetime of being an acrobat. And we created this scene where I was kind of doing a sub-Lenny Henry, David Bellamy explorer-esque thing, moving around her body, doing close-up video of her body and making, you know, commenting on the scars, and Natalie would tell me about the stories of the scars, and you know, this was projected live for the audience. So we showed it in a work in progress, and we thought it was hilarious.
We found it very funny.
But the audience went, "This is really weird. What's this middle-aged man doing, looking so closely at this young nubile woman?" And we really struggled with that. We really had to work out how to change that power dynamic. That perceived power dynamic.
Yeah, and we had, we took great care in the opening of the show to craft a scene where we make it clear without saying so that we are friends and that we trust each other and we like each other, and that this is a level relationship and doesn't have a hierarchy to it. So we made one scene, for example, with projecting a heart onto my belly, saying I like Natalie, but not like that, and then crossing it out. But so that was quite a process, and in that kind of we got talking even more and realized through that how important. How much the onlooker and the person who takes a picture this can be a very intrusive thing because the person decides on the moment of taking the picture, frames the subject, and then keeps that picture and does with it, places it within a narrative whichever way they want. So traditionally, the role of photography has had an element of this hierarchy and this stealing the image of someone. Which you can see sometimes if you go on holiday to exotic places. Now people think that exotic, not a good word, but places unfamiliar to them, and they believe that both the local people and everything they see around them is for the taking of collecting pictures, whether those people like it or not. And we realized also how, because we all have phones in our pockets and we can pretty much take pictures ourselves, this dynamic has really shifted and we are in an age where the power dynamic has been shifted towards the person, towards the subject. So now these days we can tell our own stories with our own pictures. We frame ourselves with our phones the way we like them. We like that to be. So we'll come to that later, but with that comes the power of the image to recreate the representation of yourself, which is a very novel thing in a way. Then, of course, there's also the explorer's gaze, the scientific gaze, and the gaze of the empathic gaze of friendship, of discovering something together in this image that you've created together in a playful space, which is what we are doing. Like very often, in the making of this piece, we've watched footage together and talked about it. How do I perceive it? How does Mark perceive it? We have this scene which shows my skin really, really close up in a handstand, which we'll show you in a minute. And I found that disgusting. I found it so revolting to see this fleshy, mortal thing of blood and bones, and that is me. So we had many conversations around that, of reinterpreting the meaning of the image, sort of that this really comes together from both sides. Is this already the close-up video?
You're talking about revealing the unseen.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that one of the things which we talk about the way that we create stuff, as well as we're talking about, so I'm making propositions, visual propositions, but also about biography, about, you know, Natalie and I have a lot in common, you know, in that we're both immigrants. We have both learned to live in England. We have experience of that, and we have experience of I was a circus artist. We both have experience of that, and these all come into the mix. Do you want to talk about JP's stuff?
Yeah. So we really love, one of the things that brought us together was we love to reveal to you what usually is hidden particularly in a circus performance, where in the process of training as an acrobat, the goal of this is to create this mythical body that performs a very difficult skill with seeming effortlessness. So you don't see the effort, you don't see the training behind it, you don't see the continued pain and struggle that is part of that, even while doing it on stage. And at the same time, sometimes the opposite is the case, that it's so normal for me to do handstands every day that I really have to remind myself that my mind wanders and I think of all sorts of mundane things. And I have to remind myself that I'm doing handstands here now on stage, and it's a new thing that you see, and I should make an effort to do it. But so the streams of consciousness that go through the performer's mind, and the contrast between this sort of flawless athlete and the thoughts behind it is something we really like to talk about. And we love also to investigate why you make the choices in life that you make in general in terms of a profession, and in particular for circus, and choosing this particular discipline, because each job in general, but also each circus discipline comes with a very particular type of training, a particular type of pain, and a particular idea you wish to pursue or build of yourself when you're doing this. So that's why we talk a lot about this idea of wanting to be superhuman. For me, it was an important point to realize is that I do handstands because I get a moment where I feel superhuman. It makes me for a second feel like I'm not going to die. So the things we do in life act as compensatory mechanisms of some sort, and it's wonderful to explore that. If you're interested in reading up more about that, there's a wonderful book called Psychoanalysis by John Paul Zaccarini, who really dives more into this idea of why we choose a particular type of pain, is one of his big focuses in the book.
Yeah, and the reference to that is at the bottom of your free sheet. Yeah, it's a freely downloadable PDF. So I've always been fascinated. I'm going to stop talking and show you some stuff in a moment. But I've always been fascinated as a circus teacher and as a circus performer about the things that I see that you, the audience, can't see, that are so small that they're apparent to me but invisible to you from your distance. So I've been very interested in bringing that stuff closer, kind of using macro photography and slow motion techniques to show how the tiny movements of Natalie's fingers keep her in balance, or the marks left on a rope artist's body, or the way the hand just starts catching a juggling club, the things we can't see with the naked eye. So here's a very short video just showing a couple of those moments. So you can see how the marks left as the rope leaves her, or the way the flesh moves, or the hula hoop, or the weight of the ball on the shoulder. And this is the close-up that so revolted Natalie. Yeah. And finally, hair hanging for those who are brave enough. So we're also interested not just in exploring the exterior of the body, but also the interior. And one of the things which we're keen to look at in the future are the kind of physiological processes. What changes in the handstander's body? What's the difference between being upright and inverted? Whether the physiological changes or the brain changes. So we're looking to work with people who are using EEG technology, that kind of stuff. One of the things which we have had some success with was using a kind of really accurate thermal camera. We got Natalie to do a endurance handstand. Natalie can hold a handstand for up to 15 minutes. This is a 6-minute one, which we speeded up so you don't have to watch the whole 6 minutes. But you can see in this, as she goes into the handstand, and the image on the left is the original image, and in the center you can see the changes in the heat as she holds this handstand over the space of, in real time, is 6 minutes.
So what for me was very fascinating seeing this, the first parts of my body become more hot, and then my whole lower body becomes colder, which is how I experience it too. Yeah, these two kind of perspectives of Mark being interested in these close-up images and me being interested in describing what my body feels when I do this, that really brought us together. That was the conversations we had before we decided to work together. Those two perspectives. As you can see with both of these video excerpts, we really like to give you an experience of the visceral body, so that as much as possible you get a feeling of this body without being it. So it's very the circus can come with a great deal of spectacle because it is spectacular and unusual to see these skills. Which is wonderful. At the same time, it sometimes covers the potential of all of these circus skills to transmit more metaphorical content and the underlying layers of that. So it's very important to us to not be distracted by the spectacle, while at the same time not pretending that it doesn't exist. Quickly in the show, or in the making of it, we became very interested in this idea of what forms this idea of identity that we have, and how is this tied in with the representation in image, which is so diversified in the past 10, 15 years, since we all have phones, and with the rise of the internet, of course. Already in our daily lives, we have different roles which we sometimes have to perform. So we hold different ideas of who we are in certain contexts and who we want to be or who we fear to be. And the image and the opportunity to curate digital selves has enhanced this even more. Because, just to give you an example, you will upload a different profile picture on LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, or on Tinder. It's curated for the audience that will see you there. So you curate this notion of these different notions of selves digitally, which at the moment is we have experienced a two-dimensional internet. But the idea of simulating who we could be, if immersive environments become more accessible, that might be a real thing, a real shift, and a very interesting one to explore of what drives who we fear to be and who we want to be, and how that translates into image and digital representation. So this idea of multiple viewpoints, but also of the playfulness, or maybe not playfulness, in the curation of the self, or how you want to be perceived. Because the very interesting part for me, at least, is also how one thinks that this is a playful space, but actually who I think I am is very, very rooted in my biography and closer to my fears than my aspirations, I would say. Because if I didn't, to say it sort of in a metaphor, if I wasn't afraid, if I wasn't so scared of death, I wouldn't have to go to such extreme measures as to become a highly skilled hand balancer in order to have a few moments to pretend that I'm not going to die. So often the fears drive who you want to be strongly. So that's a thing that I'm very interested in, to talk about in the show.
Yeah, so we were, we're talking about this the idea about curating multiple identities, but also, as Natalie mentioned, of multiple viewpoints. One of the things which we do a lot and which we'd like to do is to provide the audience with different ways of doing it, of seeing what's happening on stage. In the show we employ a camera from above, so that the audience can, which we project onto the back screen, so the audience can see from in front and from above simultaneously. I'll just show you a short excerpt of a film that we show in the show itself that Natalie and I sit and watch, which again gives us different viewpoints of Natalie. Good theme type.
I have improved muscle tension. My muscles can bear an unlimited amount of weight. Sometimes my hips rotate more than 180 degrees. My head-body pressure compensation valve ensures perfectly balanced blood pressure. My torso stability recalibrates every time I am on two hands.
Yeah.
Yes.
we in the show we sit on the handstand table and watch this together with the audience. So we love to have a playfulness about watching who watches what when, to watch something with you, and definitely every time I see this, it's always interesting again for me to see what the Natalie does in a handstand. So lastly. We love to only use technology. We love to experiment with different gadgets, but we are very keen on only using technology or a gadget if it adds to the narrative and if we can tell a story with it. We kind of aspire to sort of show two streams of consciousness, the performance and the visuals, so that they tie in with each other. Because I'm sure you've all experience performances sometimes when there's video projection and performance, and the video projection is just so much more interesting than the performance. Or and sometimes there's a great performance, but there's this video projection, and you don't understand why is it there beyond a decorative. It seems to serve only a decorative purpose. And we became very interested in how can information be presented in a way that it tells a story, because it isn't so very interesting to only see the data, so to say, or the functioning of the piece of technology, the trick, so to say, that you see, this connects to that. When I lift my arm, there's a red square there. So we tried these body set, these sensors that measured my muscle tone in a handstand, and then we could see a graph of how the muscle tension changes, but there wasn't interest. It wasn't interesting to put into a performance, or we couldn't make it. That in particular, we couldn't make it work. So we continue to really also be intrigued on how can data be wrapped in a story, or what does maybe it doesn't, to find the story that's inherent in it. Another example is the images, the video of the heat camera that now we've explained to you that it's a heat camera, it films my body heat, but it does need that context to understand sort of the marvel of it. Because otherwise, for all you care, it could be an animated image. Why? But it's important to know that this has been a real moment in time. It really has filmed that handstand, and it isn't just a beautiful piece of video graphics. An example of when we found the fun and the narrative in a gadget quickly is the Kinect, because instantly it became just such a funny scene that this piece of technology just doesn't understand when I'm in a handstand. So already there was a joke and a story already connected to. And maybe we just also let's talk about maybe a bit of Forest of Lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I realized that perhaps one of the things which you should have done at the top of the show was to give you an idea of our stage. I'll show you a video now which shows the setup, but we're really trying to create an immersive environment. We cover the entire back of the stage is a video projection screen. The entire stage is a video projection screen, and we're really trying to. There are scenes where we're really trying to immerse Natalie in this environment, where she becomes part of this digital landscape, where we're trying to avoid what we were saying earlier about that's a pretty bit of video. How does that connect to what's happening on stage? Or that's interesting, what she's doing on stage. How does that connect to the video projection? One of the things which I'm very keen to create is a choreography-led video projection. So what the performer is doing on stage dictates the video projection. Those of you who have seen shows, there's a company called 1927 which does these really, really beautiful shows where they have a big backdrop and they project onto the backdrop. But the performer has to be in the right place at the right time instantly, or it's complete, or it just doesn't work. You know, they have their spot where they have to be. So I've been trying to, in our work, trying to avoid doing that. Here's a scene which is a hybrid of that, where originally it was generated from Natalie's movement, but to make it reliable to work each time, we had to go back and recreate it, to record it, and then play it back, so that Natalie had to, we had to kind of go back to that low level of Natalie having to choreograph herself to the video. So in a way, it's a failure, but it was a failure because we had to make it reliable show after show after show, and yeah. So I'll just show you that. We call this scene Forest of Lines.
Yeah, when we made, we had conversations about, when we made the scene, about does it matter whether it's performer-led? Because if we tell you, or if we make you believe that it is, if we hadn't told you that it's not performer-led, you probably would have thought that somehow me and the lines have like a response connection. That's pretty much the end of us. We are very interested in working with people in the medical field and also people who find artistic representations of data. So that's just sort of to put that out. If you know someone who would be like an amazing fit to have a conversation with us, or if you want to have a conversation with us about that, that would be very interesting for us. Yeah.
That's it.
That's pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and we have time for questions now.
Thank you very much. We do have plenty of time for questions. Anybody in the room got one? Or, oh, Vic. We've got a microphone. Anyone who's reading a question, you got to speak into it. I know Vic knows this, but not everyone does.
Hi, thank you so much. It was so interesting. Mark, I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into working in performance.
So the story is that I graduated from university in the middle of the Thatcher Depression in 1983, and I found myself in a sitting room in Cardiff with a group of people who are juggling. And as everybody knows, juggling is the gateway drug to circus. And I found myself a few years later here in Bristol at the circus school at full time, which is now Circa Media. And from there I had a 20-odd year career as a circus performer. But before that, I was a photographer and working on the student newspaper in Sheffield, where I know Phil Stenton here. And I've never lost that idea of looking, of seeing things, of capturing things, of figuring out how they work from a visual viewpoint. My dad worked at MIT, and he introduced me to the work of Harold Edgerton. You've all seen the apple with the bullet flying through it. And that's been one of the inspirational images in my life of capturing that moment, the thing that we can never see with the naked eye. Yeah.
You did a degree in digital theatre.
Oh yes, I did do an MA in digital theatre at Wimbledon, the University of the Arts London, which gave me a year to indulge myself in doing exactly that kind of stuff. Yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Any more questions? Nobody? Nobody has a question. Gwen has a question. There you go.
Hiya. I just wondered if you can talk a little bit about the process you both went on in making the show, like how long it took and stages and funding.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Funding you.
I'll start, shall I? So we were really. So I saw Natalie performing her solo show, and I won't say that I stalked her, but I came to see it several times and insisted we went out for coffee. And because I was fascinated by her, by what she was doing, and her description of self in this show. What's now the National Centre for Circus Arts in London, they have a series of awards for experimentation called Lab Time. And I suggested to Natalie that we put in an award, an application for that. We got it, which gave us a hunk of money and a week's time at Jackson's Lane in North London.
Most importantly, this wasn't tied to any result. We just had, we didn't have to, often funding is tied to results that you have to have, or you already have to have the project in mind. And at this stage, when we did that 1 week at Jackson's Lane in London, we didn't know whether we were going to make a film, a lecture, or a performance, or maybe this was also the test for us of whether we get on for a week in a space, which is kind of an important thing you need to find out in practice when you're collaborating with someone. So we
did manage to get on with each other.
Then the Lowry has an amazing program called Develop With, where they support the making of a new performance alongside with production support, mentoring. And they asked us to be part of Develop With, which came with a little bit of seed funding. And then we put in an Arts Council application. Yeah. It was good to be part of the Lowry's program also because they put a premiere date, sort of a label on the show as it's got to be ready. And then this was it was 2 years until the premiere from that week at Jackson's Lane.
Yeah. So we had a lot of time together spread out. And I think that was really important because at the time I was learning the technology, and often we found that Natalie would be sitting around doing nothing while I was trying to figure out how to make it work on the computer. So it worked very well for us to have a short spurt of propositions, then for me to go away and figure out how it worked, and then to come back to Natalie. I think one of the really important things for us, and one of the things is about when you have R&D time to do R&D, not to I'm in a process at the moment which I really don't like, where we're doing work in progress showings at the end of every week, and it feels like all we're doing is working towards the work in progress showing. We're not actually doing making any new stuff. Yeah.
Tim.
Thanks very much. So between the mysteries of the human organism, and you barely touched on the brain, what's happening inside Natalie's brain while all this is going on, right? Between the mysteries of the human organism and your attempts, as it were, to instrument it with technology, do you agree that this is a fundamentally unequal juxtaposition, and perhaps you should represent that inequality in your work?
Do you want to answer first? Can I just ask, in terms of what do you mean by unequal representation? Do you mean that the brain and what the functions of the brain, that we don't touch upon that?
Well, the whole organism.
Yeah.
And your attempts to use technology to instrument it, technology which can't even get the skeleton the right way up.
Yeah.
I just mean that, really. I'm not saying that it's never possible, but as things stand, there's a kind of power relationship in there, right? And I was wondering whether that should be part of your work as well.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
I would think that by the end of the hour of the actual performance, it becomes very much apparent that the body is the marvel here that we explain, and the technology is the aid. I would think that by the end of it, it's very apparent that this is about everything that still is to be discovered, but of course.
Yeah, and you know, and we still know so little about the human body. You know, to try and represent it completely in technology is impossible. And maybe what we're trying to do is the little technology we have, to create some kind of art from that. Truth probably doesn't really enter into it.
I personally find it very interesting. I read a lot about it, and the way I transcend that problem or try to do that in the performance, is by the finding poetry and writing, which no, I'm not doing that in a very good way. Let me think about that. Do you have anything more to add to that?
No.
But I find the most important thing to transcend the duality between logical and intuitive. I think that's the way that I try to dissect that line. Like the hierarchy in that sense is the wrong way of thinking, because that comes from our idea of duality of mind and body. It's based on that. Yeah, technology is logical. This is cells and blood and bones, but it's never. The reality is not like that. So it's nice to take the step further and present a thing as integrated, because at the end of the day, what we really try to do most in the room is to create connectedness, and because often technology has the opposite effect. It doesn't connect us, insulates us. So to use this performative moment to connect and have an empathic response towards each other.
Yeah.
Did I say that properly?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, and just something I kind of want to add is that I, as a person working in video and technology, that during the pandemic, I became part of the great streaming epidemic, where we were making shows for the camera, making shows for streaming. Now that we're back a little bit back in the real world, that has completely disappeared. Nobody wants me to film their shows for streaming anymore. Everybody's realized the value of the communal space, the shared experience of theatre, and has come back to that. Maybe still, with some trepidation, myself included, but it feels like we're back in that connectedness of the theatre. Yeah.
Hi. I found it really interesting what you're saying about data and whether there's ways of showing data that is more creative. And I've been thinking a lot about that recently. And I also thought it was very interesting what you're saying about the fact that although the data is interesting, and it's very interesting to watch like your body changing and the heat sensor and everything, the relationship between performer and the data representation is not so interesting, because it's just like, this is this, and it's mirrored exactly, right? It's like a one-to-one relationship. And I just wondered, like, I don't know anything about this, but would there be a way of exploring a potential like algorithm or computer program or a game engine or a game whereby, you know, you could take that data and you could put it into the process, and then that data could be fed back to you differently, and the relationship is more reciprocal, or then you're responding to one another instead of it being one-to-one.
That would be amazing. It's another bit of technology you have to learn, Mark.
Sign up for the next course.
That sounds amazing. We somewhat sometimes, I keep saying to Mark, he should have a team but there's a lot of things to learn, and it's mostly all on Mark to do. So sometimes we're just limited by how quickly Mark can learn the thing, which he learns very quickly. But so that's why we would love to work with someone who currently neither of us is able to design a game.
I mean, it would be, you know, I've done some work with Unity, and you know, the ideas of being able to put Natalie on the stage in an environment which responds to her, which, you know, feeds back that creating art from the data from her body would be just great. Yeah, we need to find the people who can do that for us.
Yeah. That was definitely.
Yeah, when you do, like, tell me, because I want to also know.
Sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, we'll create a list.
Any more questions from anyone? Oh. Yeah.
I'm going to call it with this microphone.
No, it works for online. It's not for in the room.
Pardon me. Mark and Natalie, I adore the way you talk about your work. What do you feel will be the challenges when you come to describe or even sell this to a wider audience?
Yeah. So the first challenge is to not be labeled with the word circus. Anybody who's working in circus and is trying to do something which isn't spectacle always finds it problematic to sell their work.
Yeah, or that isn't a family show. We feel, and at the same time, circus is our background, so we don't want to not use the word and pretend we're not acrobat, because clearly I'm an acrobat, Mark has been an acrobat, and that is the difficulty of where to fit in. Because of course when people book the show, they would prefer us to be a family-friendly show or a spectacular show, but we are neither. Space is somewhat of a confinement, because ideally we need 4-5 meters height, right? Because of the scale of the camera being projected to the back wall as well. And we have a very long get-in time, so this can be a challenge for a studio theatre, which is the spaces we would tour in commonly in the UK, because we have an at least 8-hour setup at best.
But yeah, selling the shows, I mean, it's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just trying to find the right description.
We just need to be on bigger stages and bigger theatres. That's our problem.
Better costumes and bigger computers.
Yeah.
Great. Time for probably one last question. Yep, here we go.
Thank you. Just interested to hear a bit more about what you're doing live, Mark, and whether you kind of see yourself as a performer in the piece. Kind of interested to hear what you're kind of controlling, or whether you see yourself as a kind of, letting the technology.
Yeah, so I'm very much a performer in the show. Yes, I'm here at my desk at the side of I'm on the stage left of the stage, but I am on stage. I'm pressing the buttons. Natalie and I have scenes where we're together on the stage itself. We have a constant dialogue throughout the show. We went through a lot of iterations of this relationship. Was I just sitting there in a white lab coat and Natalie doing stuff on stage? And we realized that really it was, once we'd overcome the issues about being about man and woman on stage, once we'd established that it was a friendship and it was a friendly relationship, yeah, very much. And there's I even get the stage to myself for a moment. Yeah, so.
That's true. We have one of my favorite scenes is what we call dance with camera, where Mark has a big remote camera, and we both hold the camera. We do like a contemporary dance thing with it while we talk to each other about what Mark sees through the camera and the stories that arise from it. So yeah. Yeah.
All right, I think that's probably all we've got time for. So can everyone join me in giving a big hand for Mark and Natalie? Before you all go, a reminder, please take a look at the studio website. We've got lots of events coming up in the next few weeks. First Friday is next week. That's our monthly social thing in the studio on Friday evening. We've also got a great workshop on Tuesday evening where Harriet Horban-Worley will be showing us how to build our own low-tech digital gardens. That's part of their residency with Container Magazine in conjunction with Control Shift's Feeling Machines program of events. If you want to stick around in Hot Desk today or find out more about what we do, then please come find one of the studio team. Studio team, hands in the air. All of you. And we'll be happy to help. If you're watching online, drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today. We'll see you again, same time, same place next week.